Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the latest edition of Walter's World, the podcast series from Astadia. My name is Walter Sweat. I am the Astadia CTO, and this podcast series is designed to bring in industry experts who have lived and breathed mainframe migrations and to share their experiences and their thoughts with everyone. Today, I am truly excited to have someone that I have long respected and been lucky to call a friend with us, Steve Steuart, who is the worldwide go-to-market specialist at AWS. Steve, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us today.
No problem, Walter. How you
It's
doing?
Good to see you. Good to see you too. Steve, although I think everyone in the industry does know you, for those who may not yet know you, could you tell us a little bit about your career and how our paths have crossed over the years?
Yeah, I mean, so it's most people know I was the previous CTO of Astadia, and at Astadia when I started in 1992 there, but prior to that I was at a 4GL company, and then I was a computer operator for the Air Force. So I started on the mainframes back when it was hanging tapes and playing right ring toss. I don't know if everybody played that, but I used to play that as an operator during mid shift and swing shift. But I've been around mainframes for a lot longer than I like to admit, but starting from the 80s all the way through. But at Astadia, we were working as a 4GL company and doing Y2K work in 1992-93. The Y2K work started happening, and we were looking for cheap LPARs. And so we partnered with Micro Focus, and we used SCO back in those days of the luggable compacts. Remember those?
We remember those all too well.
This is before the laptops, so we had luggables, and I would have SCO, and my team would be using that to test and target. And we had our customer at that time and said, well, if you're testing there, can you run it there? And that was our first mainframe migration back then, and that was ugly. One thing is testing and another thing is production, but we learned a lot of battle scars, and our team learned a lot as to what it means to take mainframe workloads, and that's the start of it. And our teams have done 200 plus since then, and so a lot of experience dealing with these types of lift and shift, replatform, rehost, refactor, however you want to.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we all remember those days of 65-pound laptops, and I don't miss them a bit. I'm sure you don't either.
Exactly. So that's how I got into this business. And you and I have been we've competed and partnered over the years, depending on where you were at and whatnot. So it's always been a pleasure. And the interesting thing about this industry is a really close knit. We may be competitors in situations, and we'd be helping each other. Sometimes you're a lifeline. I need some help on, have you ever encountered this? And that's that small community that we have that's really interesting.
I think we're blessed that we have, all of us in this industry, that ability to share experiences and to have organizations that, as you say, we've competed against, but we also work with. And
right.
Bottom line is what's right for the customer. And it's always exciting for us to get a chance to work together.
You got to have success. So if we make each other successful, then that helps the overall industry. And so I'm a big believer of that. So if somebody asks me a question, have you ever dealt with Dial 280 or some, whatever, and I have my little Rolodex and I can help with that, then so be it.
That's the way it should be. Now, Steve, you've been at AWS for multiple years now. Can you tell everyone what your role specifically is at AWS?
Yeah, so I'm going on 3 years at AWS. I'm the worldwide go-to-market, and what that means is that there's leadership principles here, and that's to earn trust. How do I earn trust with our customers? That it's we can provide safe passage of your mainframe assets over to the cloud, onto AWS, and the services and all the things that we bring to it. So I'm more of an evangelist type scenario, and do speaking engagements and talking to customers. And Walter, that how much battle scars we have in this space, and so that's nothing like experience and having the gray hair, sitting across the CIO. That's my role.
I think it's not just comforting, but important for companies to talk to people who have been in the trenches, who understand the challenges that they're going to face, and there will be challenges, obviously.
Correct.
but someone who can help them say, this is what you need to look out for, and to help guide them as they go through. And I don't know of anyone who does that better than you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Talking about AWS specifically, now I think I know this, but I kind of like to ask you to talk about how important is the mainframe migration market to AWS?
Well, we're responding to to our customers. Our customers have been, we've been asking our customers, hey, you need to come to the cloud. There's a benefits of the cloud. Let's go to the cloud, And our customers are going back, great. What am I going to do with my Z15 and my Z16 and my S400s and my Exadata and all these different legacy appliances that they currently have? And so this is important to us because our customers have been asking that. And so we've built a framework to allow safe transition of those legacy workloads onto AWS through different types of programs that we've established. As an industry first, I think you'll attest that nobody else is doing what we're doing here today. And it's just a very interesting way of being able to have access to technologies. We're industry first on coming up with a certification for mainframe modernization, which, that's a cert that you apply for, and we validate that you have that. Our partner ecosystem and the professional services, but also internally, the support that we've built around SA. So, it's a who's who. Walter, I think you'll see a lot of folks that are here that it's a who's who in the mainframe migration space and sellers, as well as part of our worldwide sales support organization. So WWSL.
Yeah, absolutely. Y'all have some superstars who have been in this industry for an awful long time and have seen the challenges and the successes that people are actually able to have.
Correct.
Steve, as your role as an evangelist, what are some of the biggest concerns you hear from your potential customers as they consider that transition from mainframe to cloud?
Well, it varies, right? It varies from the concerns I have is like, how do I get started? How am I going to do it? I think, the way I stated is that we can meet your compute and IO on the mainframe on this end, right? Compute and IO. We're about 90% of the workloads. There's some workloads I wouldn't touch. TPF is an example, right? But we can do that. How do I transition that workload? And if you have integration patterns, I cannot compete with the compute and IO bus on a mainframe going across the cloud. And that's one of the reasons why people fail. They do that. Number two is that they confuse an end-state architecture with a transitional state architecture. And what I mean by that, if you're doing big bang, that's great. But if you're doing it, these accounts are going to do phased approach. So what is your transitional state architecture? Is it FTP? Is it, REST? Is it MQ? Is it CTG, Kicks Transaction Gateway? Multiple patterns. But you need to have definition of the integration patterns for your hybrid, for your transitional state architecture, definition of real time. What's real time? What is the definition of real time? What is the source of truth? You have all these things that you have to bring to bear so that you're able to, earn trust with our customers. But our number one concern is, how do I get started? How do I break the monolithic into components, right? And a lot of times people, and you and I have had this discussion that some CIOs don't want to touch it because I'm going to retire in 2 to 3 years. Okay, so we'll talk to you in about 2 to 3 years. There's a lot more people that are moving and doing stuff. But I have never seen a market as hot and active in we were just talking about that. I have never seen it like that. Maybe Y2K, where we saw big interest at that time, but I have never seen anything like that, what we're seeing today.
I absolutely agree. It mystifies me. I don't think that either one of us could have ever imagined, other than maybe a Y2K. And that was kind of forced on the industry. This is the industry saying, okay, this is the direction. This is the chance for us to do things differently than we've always had to do them. And not to say that the mainframe isn't a part of that equation. In many cases, it obviously is. But people are genuinely looking for alternatives now and considering all of the ones that are out there.
I partnered with IBM, right? I was at Think, right? I was at Think, and that blows me away that I was at Think with IBM. And we're supporting IBM's patterns for hybrid. I do believe that there's going to be, we're not saying mainframes are bad. I think the mainframe's footprint's going to change. It's not going to be the massive footprints that they are. You're going to find the right workload for the compute, and how do you leverage that workload for the compute. And I see workloads transitioning. I see workloads going hybrid with data augmentation patterns. I think DevOps is going to be a big thing for it. Some of the stuff that IBM's working with Ansible to manage the mainframe workloads, I think is really cool as to what they're doing there. So from hybrid data augmentation to replatform to refactor to DevOps to whatever, these are all the patterns that we support our customers on with the mainframe. Transform with or transform to AWS is how I like to say it.
That's a good way to approach it. And this probably goes hand in hand with what you were just saying. But one of the things I wanted to ask is, when you're talking to someone and they express their concerns, what are some of the other advantages that you describe back to them that they could achieve by moving to the cloud and working in that environment?
I mean, there's multiple things depending on their business drivers, but I always like to ask the question, how long does it take you to provision 500 MIPS or 1,000 MIPS, right? And so if it's old school, buying it, getting it done, maybe it's quicker, but does it beat 24 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm able to rapidly create an environment within 24 minutes that has I can provision COBOL, JCL, kicks on that. I can have my refactoring capabilities. I mean, you gain that benefit when you're over there. So the agility is one. The other thing is that if you had to tackle your technical debt on the mainframe, we give you a lot more 200 plus services to tackle that technical debt and rethink it, and bring some of that workload over, leverage the data augmentation pattern for read-only transactions on the mainframe, consume it on AWS. There's a wide range of things that sometimes I kind of state, what is it safer to use the cloud or not use the cloud? And I think most companies will say that I have to have the cloud in my strategy. And how are you competing with the born in the cloud companies? The fintechs and the insurance techs are coming in that have no Broadcom licensing or mainframe cost. And so that's and the other one. The last one I do is, I have not seen a pitch deck for funding that says, hey, I need X millions of dollars for my mainframe.
Yeah, it's I know we have some shared experiences working in the fintech industry where they were faced with tremendous challenges being able to compete, to be as responsive as they needed to be. And that may be one of the driving forces in this movement that we're seeing now.
Right. I mean, and the other one is if you look at all the big opportunities that I've seen in the industry, is the retiring CIO. So the one that's been there for 30 years doing the same old, comes and gets replaced, or mergers and acquisitions, M&A activity.
Oh, yeah.
Where they come in and they want to figure out how to do that. So you look in the claims industries, if you're able to reduce your cost per claim by going to a lower, commodity-based compute model, that's very helpful, and that goes straight to the bottom line. So we're seeing a lot of these things, but more and more the folks are retiring and leaving the workforce and being replaced by digital natives that appreciate the cloud. Mainframes are the ultimate server huggers. And so that whole paradigm kind of changes when you're talking about the cloud.
Without a doubt. Steve, do you feel that most organizations that you talk to who are considering a move away from the mainframe, are they just trying to replicate their core applications in the cloud? Or do you feel that they're looking, whether it's in one phase or multiple phases, that they want to modernize them as well?
I think it's the business drivers are really driving towards that. So there are companies that want to modernize or rejuvenate their existing applications onto the cloud to do that. At AWS, we kind of try to advise them as to the different patterns that exist out there, and each one. I'm of the my mantra. The way I look at it is that the going into AWS, leveraging a lot of the mainframe type technologies and patterns that we have is a stepping stone towards the end game, which is cloud native and sever all your dependencies. So you should continue on your journey. It's not, let's move your mainframe workloads and put you on the cloud. The opportunities for our customers is once you're on the cloud is to go in the cloud and start consuming the services and getting rid of those kicks transactions and in your databases, and you're moving forward, going into from a macro to micro type services. I mean, that's the journey. You shouldn't look at, I'm going off the cloud, I'm going off the mainframe, or going to use this and just sit there. You should have inertia to continue on.
I totally agree. It's like it gives them the chance to transition from that thing that, I hesitate to use the word, lock them into a particular environment forever, but it's just a plethora of options that they have available to them that they wouldn't have otherwise.
And you address the latencies. If your workload is right there, and we can provision workload on the same rack with your database, and you have now the compute and IO bus type, almost similar to what you had before, right? And so we've got to look at what are the drivers and what they're doing. I always tell our customers, you know, if it's just a cost saving measure, that's great, but you really have to look at the benefits of agility, tackling your technical debt with a 200 plus services, and what is my application going to be doing tomorrow, and where do I want to go? And is it Lambda, serverless, and those types of things? And how do I start, kicking off that journey?
That makes sense. Now, Steve, I know that you and I agree on this next question, but I think it's an important one. I want to ask it anyway. You mentioned patterns before. So whether it's replatforming or rehosting or refactoring, what do you tell clients about what is the best pattern, or is there such a thing as a best pattern?
My best pattern, my favorite pattern, is the retire pattern. Eliminate scope. So that's one. But between the ones that you're just talking to, it's really what is the best pattern for you. And it's almost like an eye exam. 1 or 2. 1 or 2. And you tell the eye doctor it's going to be 1. And you'll determine the pattern that's best for you based on what you're trying to achieve. And so all of them are valid patterns. But what I always say is you need to do that bottom-up assessment, right? And figure out those big boulder items, which are, initiatives that the business is asking. And I like to rate them on the Richter scale. So from 1 to 10, if I provide this to Mary down the hall, it's an 8 on the Richter scale for her. Right. And then, okay, that's important. How do I achieve that? Now you need that referee to tell Mary, hey, that may be an 8 on you, but for the business, it's really a 5. So you still need to have that, because the users will mess you up. But back to your question, I mean, the patterns really depends on what your business drivers are. Do you have COBOL developers? Do you have Java developers? I ran into a company that had 1,000 COBOL developers in India. Another company had 0, only this staff. So that will start dictating the pattern. Do you like your application? No, I don't like my application. I don't like the refactor. I want to do new. Okay, strangler pattern, data augmentation. So it all comes when you're having dialogue and that assessment with our customers and workshops to determine what is the best pattern.
I know I've really admired what you and the team at AWS have done in being able to be responsive to customers and recognizing that they do have different needs, and what's right for one may not be right for another. I know we at Astadia try to do the same thing, to listen to what the clients have to say and to help them find the pluses and minuses of these different patterns, and then work with them to give them the solutions that they need.
Correct. That's correct. I mean, we focus on the customer and work back. And so that's why, if you look at all the things that we have within our N2 service offering, which is a managed service capability, industry first, allow you provision the tools to do whatever you need to do from assessment to deployment. So if you have these oddball technology stacks that we need to deal with, those, the C agents and the Ideal and the CA Datacoms and all of those things, that we bring in the partner community to help and address those.
Without a doubt. One of the things that we're often asked, and I'm sure that you are often asked, is about performance. What could you share about what your experience has been working with organizations in terms of performance that AWS customers have seen as they move to cloud?
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting. People have been finding alternative compute models for 30 years. And the mainframe migration modernization business is not built on failures and not being able to scale and not being able to run the same type of workloads. There's a lot of mainframe workloads, even before AWS got in, that's already been running on-prem that are significant. So we know that, to me, the advent of SSD really opened up mainframe type workloads, because now you could compete with the IO that IBM had on that. And I would say 100% of work, but a good majority. And so I always compare that with, there are mainframe workloads running on AWS. Amazon is a mainframe class workload, 24/7, needs to be available, millions of SKUs, PCI, credit card authorizations, inventory, reorders, all that. That's a mainframe class workload. And so it can scale. But if you have a poorly written application that really performs bad, it's going to perform bad on AWS as well. So how are you going to, you can't hold us to that same standard. We have to look at it and how can we optimize it? But I can safely state that, we can handle the majority of the mainframe workloads to scale as secure as what you currently have today. I've seen it. Walter, you and I have been doing this for a long time. It is possible. And so it's hard to convince people that, we haven't been in business for 30 years based on failures. And
Correct.
That's
Correct.
Right.
And it's not easy. We've been both together in front of clients enough where you've heard me say there is no Staples easy button. It takes that same level of attention that you give the mainframe.
Yeah.
But if you give the cloud that same environment, people do
It's
see
kind
that.
of funny. Right? Treat the workload like you treat the mainframe. You don't do some of these wacky patches without checking everybody I've seen on these Windows servers that in the mainframe, you treat it like a mainframe workload. Respect it, right? And if you do that, then you can actually be able to scale and make sure you provide it with enough resources that it needs. And it's a very sophisticated workload that needs
Without a doubt.
Touch.
Steve, I'd like to ask this of you. Why do you feel that AWS is the best platform for companies to consider when they're looking at cloud? What's specifically about AWS do you feel that y'all just excel at?
Well, I can tell you, I've been in the industry a long time, and I've never seen anything like this. But for mainframe workloads that want to transform their workloads either with or to AWS, with the cloud or data augmentation, whatnot, what we have built here is multiple things. One is a managed service where you don't have to procure the tools from the vendors or whatnot, that you just provision that from your console. It's totally managed and scalable, automatically available in all regions. So this service is available, I forget the number, you caught me on that, but there's a lot of regions throughout the world. And if there's a region that's not on, we can have a mechanism to provide that on there. Number two, access to the solutions architects that are who's who in the mainframe space that been in the mainframe migrations. You can access those. People like myself that have been in the industry for a long time. Our partner ecosystem where we have certifications, and we know that when we refer a partner, they've been there, done that, and that we can actually work on that. We also have the partner ecosystem and the certification, but the investment vehicles that we have for our partners to kick off their mainframe journey. So what I can say that differentiates us from everybody else is that internally we have a little directory. So if you type in mainframe, we have a lot of people that have mainframes in their titles, and that's an industry first. The amount of people that we have with mainframes in their titles here to help you, not force feeding you a pattern, but what is the best pattern for you and how to get started. Our partners range from IBM themselves all the way down to all the SIs, to Astadia, to where all of these folks. So that's what we really bring. It's an industry first. I've never seen anything like it.
I would agree. I mean, y'all do have that amazingly strong talent pool who have the scars, who know what it means, not just running the mainframe, but how to migrate from a mainframe, and what are the ins and outs and the things that you need to look for, because those are two totally different concepts, and it's important to understand both.
Correct.
You talked about architecture earlier. How important is it from your perspective to understand the architecture of the mainframe applications as the replacement architecture in the cloud is defined? Things like, as what you mentioned before, compute versus data versus all of the other components that are there? How important is it to know what you're starting from to be able to define what you're getting to?
Well, and we provide templates on reference architectures for that. But we know what's interesting, and Walter, the way I look at it when I'm talking to the folks that are in the room like this, the mainframe guys that sit there with their arms crossed, I'm here because my boss told me to be here, and we're going to talk about the architecture. And I think you and I have been in many of those meetings. The mainframe is the original cloud. That was the original cloud. And if you look at some of the components that exist in the cloud, an LPAR is an EC2, and your database goes into Aurora. We could do word associations of how we break up to those architectures. Now, we're not here to replicate, duplicate the exact architecture that you have in a mainframe, but how do we break those into different components, your presentation layer, your application layer, your database layer, into the best architecture to take advantage of the cloud itself. And that's what we talk through. So we focus on what is your end state architecture that you want to go. Event driven is really big right now. People want to go to an event driven architecture, but you need to agree on that, transitional state architecture. And if you're dependent on a batch process that ends at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're not event driven. So you may want to be event driven, but maybe you can consider that as an event. But these are the things that we have to understand, and we can get you there. But we do have a lot of architectures based on what we're seeing that we can provide some guidance on to kickstart from.
And that makes sense. It's as you say, you don't just automatically get there. You have to understand what the trade-offs are and what you need to consider. And then once you're there, then decide even beyond that what you want to do to leverage. And AWS, I think, excels at providing that capability.
It's going to take work, and it takes dedication, and you need sponsorship. I mean, this is not an easy thing. I mean, it's something that has to be done. So it's like I said, what's better? Nothing on the cloud, just staying on the mainframe, or working with the cloud, have the mainframe and the cloud in your arsenal.
Yep.
And I think that's more and more what we're seeing.
Yep, the benefits of both. I think that's a great way to do it. Similarly, I view it this way. Do you feel that companies have more flexibility now in the tools that exist in the cloud? Talking about the mainframe, numbers of companies we've talked to over the years who don't have a DR. Now in the cloud, being able to have a DR environment is so drastically easier. Same thing for like data replication, the ways that you can do security, that you're not tied to just mainframe ways.
Correct.
Do you think that flexibility is greater now than it used to be?
Again, we're seeing those along with the architects, that are digital natives that are accustomed to that. They're entering into the enterprise saying, hey, I'm accustomed to this type of architecture. Where is that over here? And that is another benefit for that. So that how can you have your HA and your DR plans and things of that nature for that definitely is something that we're seeing as a selling point. Really, it's an advantage to have that and being able to tap into it.
Oh, without a doubt, without a doubt. Steve, last question. I'd like to ask you, and I've asked several folks who've been on the podcast this question. If you were to put on your Swami hat and look in your crystal ball, do you see the pace of companies who are now considering the cloud? Is that going to change over the next 5 years? We talked before about, wow, it's more hectic than it's ever been. Do you see that changing?
Well, so Walter, we spoke over to the years, and every year it goes, I have never seen anything like it. And then the next year it's like, I can't believe it's more than last year. And then now this year it's even more than that. So I'm scared to see what's going to happen in the next 5 years. But I do believe that this is not the end of the mainframe, right? I think the mainframe is going to be around a long time before you and I will be gone and doing different things, right? I think it's going to be around. It's not going to be the same. I think there's certain workloads that you need to stay on the mainframe.
Absolutely.
Right?
They are designed that they function best there.
Right. And so to me is that I think we're seeing, but there's a lot of workloads that you can move over, and there's a lot of workloads that can do that. And that's why, that's why we're in this business. And I think, I do see a mainframe in the future, in the next 5 years, I would say easy 10, 20 years.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt.
Workloads that'll be out there, but it's going to be different. But in the next 5 years, we're seeing exponential interest. Look, what's happened in our industry is when our CEO said that we're going into the mainframe modernization space and we're going to provide this service and we're going to provide you resources and templates and experts that you can have access. That's what I call an earned trust moment. When you and I were in our smaller companies and we're trying to talk to a multi-billion-dollar company, hey, trust us, we can do this. It's not going to happen. But when you're talking about a $70 billion company partnered with the Accentures of the world and all these large SIs, that's why we're seeing this type of interest, right? And it's just gonna grow in the next 5 years.
I think so. I think 20 years from now, there will be a book written about that point in time when he did proclaim that, because that seemed to be the thing that said, okay, let's strap in because this is about to get fun.
Right. I mean, I was laughing because when the announcement happened, it said, Steve, are you available to talk to ABC company? I go, those folks escorted me out when I said, let's move off-prem, move that mainframe workload. I mean, they literally, are you crazy talk? I mean, so we're seeing the folks that never leave, or the bleed blue folks that are actually talking about hybrid and all the different types of patterns.
Absolutely, without a doubt.
So.
Steve, I want to thank you. I know what your schedule is like, and I know it's not easy to carve out 30 minutes, and I truly appreciate you taking the time. I know the audience had to really appreciate your experiences and what you see in this industry, and I know that you'll welcome any of them reaching out to you if they have any questions.
I appreciate it, definitely. So just reach out I'm on LinkedIn, so you can find me there, and if you have any questions, reach out.
All right, thanks so much, Steve. And to the audience, thank you today for taking the time. As always, we really appreciate you attending these podcast series elements, and we look forward to providing plenty of more. So please don't hesitate to look us up at www.astadia.com and check our podcast series to see what's coming up. Thank you all, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.